The briefcase sat abandoned on the bench like someone had just evaporated mid-thought, and Kira Davis almost walked past it before her conscience kicked in hard enough to make her stop. Rain threatened overhead, the kind of gray November sky that made everything in downtown Chicago look washed out and tired. She glanced around the small plaza outside the federal courthouse, searching for anyone who looked panicked or like they were missing something important. But the lunch crowd just moved past in their usual rush, clutching coffee cups and checking phones. Kira approached the briefcase slowly, half expecting someone to appear and accuse her of trying to steal it. It was beautiful, the kind of leather that screamed money, with brass fixtures that caught what little light filtered through the clouds. She looked around one more time before carefully lifting it. Heavy. Definitely full of something important. She worked as a paralegal at a small firm 3 blocks away, and her lunch break was already half over, but leaving expensive property in the rain felt wrong. Kira checked the exterior for a business card or name tag. Nothing. She bit her lip, debating. The courthouse had a lost and found, but that meant standing in line for 20 minutes she did not have. Her boss would kill her if she was late again. Making a decision, she carefully unzipped the main compartment just enough to peek inside, hoping for identification. Files. Lots of them. And a laptop. Definitely something someone would be freaking out about losing. She reached carefully between 2 folders and found a business card holder. Maxwell Jennings, Chief Executive Officer, Jennings Property Development. The card was thick, expensive stock with embossed lettering. Below the name was a phone number and an address that she recognized as being in one of the new high-rises overlooking the lake, the kind of building where the penthouses started at $5 million. Kira pulled out her phone and dialed before she could second-guess herself. It rang 4 times before a harried male voice answered. "This is Max." "Hi, this is going to sound weird, but I found a briefcase outside the federal courthouse with your business card inside. I think you might have left it on a bench." There was a beat of silence, then a string of relieved cursing that made her pull the phone away from her ear slightly. "Oh, thank God. Yes. Yes, that is mine. Where are you exactly?" "Still at the courthouse plaza by the east entrance near the coffee cart. Do not move, please." "I will be there in 10 minutes. Actually, make it 7. Please do not leave." The desperation in his voice was real enough that Kira felt her decision to stop had been the right one. "I will be here. The briefcase is safe. Thank you. Seriously, thank you so much." He hung up, and Kira looked down at the briefcase in her hands, then at her watch. Her lunch break was definitely blown. She texted her boss a quick excuse about a personal emergency and hoped Janet would not ask too many questions. 8 minutes later, a man came striding across the plaza like he was parting the Red Sea, and Kira knew immediately it was Maxwell Jennings. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he had been running his hands through it all morning. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, the kind tailored specifically for his frame, and even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders begin to ease when he spotted her holding his briefcase. "You are an absolute lifesaver," he said as he reached her, slightly breathless. Up close, he was even more striking. Strong jaw, dark eyes that were currently flooded with relief, and the kind of presence that made people look twice. He had to be around 30, maybe 32. "I cannot even begin to tell you what a disaster it would have been if someone else had found this." Kira handed over the briefcase, and he immediately checked inside, his shoulders dropping another inch as he confirmed everything was there. "Important meeting?" she asked. "Deposition. Horrible, contentious 6-hour deposition about a property dispute that has been dragging on for 2 years." He looked up from the briefcase, really seeing her for the first time, and something shifted in his expression. "I set this down for 30 seconds to take a phone call and completely forgot about it. That never happens to me. Stressful day, you could say that." He smiled then, and it transformed his whole face from intimidatingly handsome to approachable. "I owe you dinner, or lunch, or honestly whatever you want, name it." Kira laughed, surprised. "That is really not necessary. I just did what anyone would do. Most people would not have called. They would have turned it in somewhere or ignored it completely." He shifted the briefcase to his other hand and extended his right one. "Max Jennings, Kira Davis." His handshake was firm and warm despite the cold air. "Kira Davis, I am seriously in your debt. At minimum, let me buy you coffee to replace the rest of your lunch break that I just demolished." She should say no. She should make an excuse and get back to work and forget about the attractive CEO with the grateful smile. But something about the way he looked at her, genuinely thankful and maybe a little intrigued, made her pause. "I really do need to get back to work," she said, but her tone was not quite as firm as it should have been. "Then dinner. Tomorrow night, please. I promise I am not a serial killer, and I am genuinely grateful. Plus, I make it a rule to properly thank people who save me from professional catastrophe." Kira hesitated. She had not been on a real date in 8 months, not since her ex had decided he wanted to find himself in Costa Rica without her. She was rusty and nervous, and this man was clearly out of her league in about 7 different ways. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Dinner tomorrow." Max's smile widened. "Perfect. Can I get your number? I will text you details." They exchanged information, and Kira was acutely aware of how worn her phone case looked compared to his sleek device. He did not seem to notice or care. "Thank you again, Kira. Really. You have no idea how much stress you just saved me." He glanced at his watch, expensive and understated. "I have to run back inside, but I will text you later about tomorrow." "Sounds good." She watched him jog back toward the courthouse entrance, briefcase secured in his grip, and wondered what exactly she had just agreed to. A date with a millionaire CEO was not exactly her normal Tuesday. Her phone buzzed before she even made it back to her office. "You are amazing." "Thank you again. Looking forward to tomorrow." Kira saved his number and tried not to think about how much her nicest dress was going to pale in comparison to wherever he planned to take her. The text came at 6 that evening while she was reheating leftover pasta in her tiny apartment kitchen. "How do you feel about Italian? There is a place in River North I think you would like. Nothing too formal, I promise." She looked down at her yoga pants and oversized sweatshirt, then at the text from a man who probably had a personal chef. "Italian sounds great. Perfect. I will pick you up at 7. Send me your address." Kira bit her lip. Her apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that was gentrifying but had not quite gotten there yet. The building was old, the hallways smelled like Mrs. Chen's cooking, and her door stuck when it rained. She could already imagine the look on his face, but she sent the address anyway because what was the alternative? Meeting him somewhere felt weird, and she was not going to start whatever this was by being embarrassed about her life. "See you tomorrow at 7, came his reply, followed by a smiley face that felt charmingly out of place from a CEO. Kira spent the next day in a state of distracted anxiety that made her boss ask twice if she was feeling okay. She left work early, claiming a dentist appointment, and spent 2 hours trying on every combination of clothes in her closet. Eventually, she settled on a dark green dress that her best friend had made her buy 6 months ago, and heels that she hoped would not kill her feet. At 6:55, she was pacing her small living room, reapplying lipstick for the 3rd time when her buzzer rang. She pressed the intercom button. "Hi, it is Max. Come on up. 4th floor. She propped her apartment door open slightly and listened to his footsteps on the stairs. He appeared at her landing slightly winded but smiling, holding a small bouquet of flowers that looked like they had come from somewhere much nicer than the bodega on the corner. "Hi," he said, and his eyes did that thing again where he really looked at her, taking in the dress and the effort, and his smile grew. "You look beautiful. Thank you." She accepted the flowers, pink and white peonies that must have cost a fortune. "These are gorgeous. Come in for just a second while I put them in water." He stepped into her apartment, and she tried to see it through his eyes. Small but clean. Second-hand furniture that she had refinished herself. Plants on every available surface because they made the space feel more alive. Books stacked in creative piles because she had run out of shelf space years ago. "I love your place," he said, and he sounded genuine. "It feels like someone actually lives here." "That is a nice way of saying it is small," Kira said, filling a vase with water. "No, I mean it. My place looks like a hotel room. Everything is clean and modern and completely impersonal." He picked up a small ceramic cat from her bookshelf. "I like this. I made that in a pottery class last year. It was supposed to be a vase, but turned into more of an abstract cat situation." He laughed, setting it down carefully. "It has character." Kira arranged the flowers quickly, hyper-aware of him in her space, of how his suit probably cost more than her monthly rent, of how this whole situation felt surreal. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." His car was parked illegally right in front of her building, hazards flashing. It was sleek and black and probably cost more than she had made in the past 3 years combined. He opened her door before she could reach for the handle. The restaurant was beautiful in an understated way. All exposed brick and soft lighting, the kind of place where the menu did not list prices and the waitstaff moved like dancers. Kira felt her anxiety spike as they were led to a quiet corner table. "You said nothing too formal," she murmured as they sat down. "This is not formal. Formal is when they have 7 forks and someone explains each course in French." He grinned at her. "This is just good food in a nice setting. I promise you will like it." The waiter brought water and bread, and Max ordered a bottle of wine without looking at the price. Kira studied her menu and tried not to calculate how much this meal was going to cost him. "So tell me about you," Max said, leaning back in his chair with his attention focused entirely on her. "What do you do when you are not rescuing forgetful executives?" "I am a paralegal at a small firm. Estate planning, mostly, which sounds boring, but I actually like it. Helping people organize their lives, making sure their families are taken care of." She broke off a piece of bread. "It is not glamorous, but it is steady. Do you like it?" "Most days. My boss can be intense, but the work is good. What about you? Besides leaving expensive briefcases on benches." He laughed, and she noticed how it crinkled the corners of his eyes. "That is not usually part of my routine. I run a property development company that my father started. We buy old buildings, restore them, try to maintain the character while making them functional for modern use. It is a constant battle between preserving history and making money. Which side usually wins? Depends on the project. And how much my father is breathing down my neck about profit margins." He took a sip of water. "He is technically retired, but retired for him means only calling me 3 times a day instead of 10. The waiter returned and they ordered. Kira chose the simplest pasta on the menu because everything else felt too elaborate. Max ordered something she could not pronounce. "So yesterday," he said after the waiter left. "What made you stop? A lot of people would have just kept walking." Kira shrugged. "I do not know. It felt wrong to leave it there, and I kept thinking about how panicked I would be if I lost something that important. You have a strong sense of empathy. Or I am just nosy enough to check inside." He grinned. "Either way, I am grateful." That briefcase had documents for a deal I have been working on for 18 months. Losing them would not have been the end of the world, but it would have been a massive headache. What kind of deal? A historic theater on the South Side. It has been abandoned for 20 years and we want to restore it, turn it into a venue again. But there are about 15 different parties involved, and everyone has opinions. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that seemed unconscious. Yesterday was just one more hearing in a long series of hearings. It sounds complicated. It is. But it is also the kind of project that made me want to do this work in the first place. That theater was gorgeous once. It could be again. The passion in his voice was evident, and Kira found herself leaning in, genuinely interested. When will it be finished, if everything goes well? 2 years, but something always comes up in these projects. Their food arrived and the conversation flowed easily from there. He asked about her family, and she told him about growing up with 2 older brothers who had taught her to be tough. He told her about being an only child with parents who had impossibly high expectations. She made him laugh with a story about a disastrous pottery class incident involving a kiln fire and the fire department. He told her about the time he had accidentally bid on the wrong property at an auction and ended up owning a defunct mini golf course. What did you do with it? She asked, laughing. Sold it to someone who actually wanted a defunct mini golf course. Lost money on the deal, but my father still brings it up at family dinners. Sounds like a fun family dynamic. It is something. He signaled for the waiter, ordered dessert to share despite Kira's protests that she was full. What about you? Close with your family? Pretty close. My brothers are both married with kids now, so family gatherings are loud and chaotic. My parents retired to Florida last year, which was an adjustment. You miss them? Yeah, but they seem happy. My mom sends me approximately 40 text messages a day about their pickleball league. The dessert was some kind of chocolate creation that should have been illegal, and they traded the plate back and forth. The easy intimacy of sharing food with someone you are starting to like. The restaurant gradually emptied around them until the waiter politely mentioned they would be closing soon. How is that possible? Max checked his watch. It is 11:30. Time flies when you are eating overpriced pasta, Kira said. He paid the bill while she was in the restroom, which she had expected but still made her feel odd. This was his world, not hers. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, comfortable. The city lights reflected off the lake as they drove along the shoreline, and Kira watched the water, thinking about how strange it was that a lost briefcase had led to this. Can I see you again? Max asked as he pulled up in front of her building. I would like that. This weekend. I know a great breakfast place, and then we could walk around the Art Institute if you want. That sounds perfect. He walked her to her door despite her saying it was not necessary, and at her stoop, he paused. Thank you for taking a chance on dinner with a random CEO. Thank you for the best meal I have had in months. He leaned in and she thought he might kiss her, but instead he pressed his lips to her cheek, warm and brief. Good night, Kira. Good night. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her apartment in a daze, kicked off her heels and collapsed on her couch with her phone. There was already a text from him. Made it home safely. Already looking forward to Saturday. Kira smiled at her screen like a teenager and typed back. Me too. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter day that made Chicago look like a postcard. Max picked her up at 9. Bringing coffee and muffins from a bakery she had always walked past, but never been able to justify the prices. You did not have to do this, she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. I wanted to. Plus, I was not sure if you were a breakfast person. I am a coffee person who occasionally eats breakfast. He laughed, and they drove to a diner on the west side that had been there for 60 years and looked like it. The booths were red vinyl, the waitress called everyone honey, and the breakfast special cost $7. This is your idea of a great breakfast place. Kira teased as they slid into a booth. Best pancakes in the city. I have been coming here since I was a kid. My dad used to bring me every Saturday before his meetings. The food was exactly as good as he promised. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation easy like they had known each other for years instead of days. He told her about studying architecture before switching to business. She told him about her dream of going back to school for social work someday. "Why do you not?" he asked. "Money, time, the usual reasons." She poured more syrup on her pancakes. "It is not urgent, just something I think about sometimes." At the Art Institute, they wandered through galleries, and Kira discovered that Max had opinions about modern art that made her laugh. He stood in front of a Rothko for 10 minutes arguing that it was either genius or a very expensive joke. He could not decide which. "You are allowed to just enjoy it," she said. "But where is the fun in that?" They had lunch at the Museum Café, then walked along Michigan Avenue even though the wind off the lake was brutal. Max bought her hot chocolate from a street vendor, and they ducked into shops to warm up, both of them pink-cheeked and laughing. "I should get you home before you freeze to death," he said finally, around 4 when the sun was starting to set. Probably wise. In the car, Kira's phone buzzed with a text from her friend Rachel. "How is the date with Mr. Moneybags?" She must have made a face because Max glanced over. "Everything okay, just my friend being nosy." She hesitated, then decided honesty was better than weird games. She wanted to know how the date with Mr. Moneybags was going. Max was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Does it bother you, the money thing?" "It is just different. I am not used to it. If it helps, I am not that person. I mean, yes, I have money, but I work for it, and I do not really care about most of the stuff that comes with it." He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "I just want to spend time with you, no expectations, no weirdness, just us." Kira looked at his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands gripped the wheel like he was actually nervous about her answer. "Okay, just us," he smiled, relieved. "Good." At her door, he kissed her for real this time, a soft press of lips that made her head spin and her hands grip the front of his coat to keep steady. When they broke apart, he was grinning. "I have been wanting to do that since Tuesday. You should have done it sooner." Noted for future reference. They fell into a rhythm over the next few weeks that felt natural despite their different worlds. Max would text her good morning every day without fail. They had dinner twice during the week, nothing fancy, just Chinese takeout at her place or burgers at his favorite dive bar. On weekends, they explored the city together, finding new places and revisiting old favorites. Kira met his best friend, a lawyer named Aaron who grilled her like she was on trial before declaring she was too good for Max. Max met Rachel, who pulled Kira aside and whispered that if she messed this up, Rachel was going to date him herself. 3 weeks in, Max invited her to his apartment for the first time. It was everything she expected and nothing like she imagined. Yes, it was huge and expensive with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. But it was also weirdly empty, like he had bought furniture and then forgotten to actually make it a home. "You are not kidding about the hotel room thing," she said, standing in his massive living room. "I know. It is bad." He looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. "I keep meaning to do something about it, but I am never here long enough to care. You need some plants, and art that you actually like, not just things that match the couch. Will you help me? Help you decorate? Yeah, make it feel less like a showroom." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. I trust your taste." So the next Saturday, they went to plant nurseries and thrift stores, finding things that actually meant something instead of just filling space. Max proved to be hilariously indecisive about plants, debating between a snake plant and a fern for 20 minutes before Kira just bought both. "You are going to be a nightmare when we buy a house someday," she said without thinking, then froze when she realized what she had implied. Max just grinned and kissed her temple. "Probably, but you will keep me sane." That night, they cooked dinner together in his pristine kitchen that had clearly never been used for anything more complicated than coffee. Max was a competent cook, and they worked well together, moving around each other easily, stealing bites and kisses in equal measure. After dinner, they ended up on his couch with wine and old movies on his absurdly large television. Kira curled into his side, and Max wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and it felt right in a way that made her chest ache with how much she was starting to care about him. "I am really happy I found your briefcase," she said softly. He kissed the top of her head. "Best thing that ever happened to me, losing it." 1 month became 2, and then 3. Winter gave way to the muddy beginnings of spring, and Kira found that her life had reorganized itself around Max without her really noticing. They spent most nights together, either at his place or hers, though her apartment was cozier and his had better water pressure. She had a drawer at his place. He had a toothbrush at hers. Her boss noticed she was happier, more focused. Max's father noticed he was smiling more during their contentious phone calls. Kira's brothers met Max at a family dinner and gave their approval despite ribbing him mercilessly about being rich. Max's mother invited Kira to lunch and spent 2 hours telling stories about Max as a child that made him turn red but made Kira fall even more in love with him. Love. That was the thing she could not quite say yet, even though it was obvious. She loved him. Loved the way he brought her coffee in the morning just how she liked it. Loved how he listened when she talked about her day like it was the most interesting thing he had ever heard. Loved his ambition and his kindness, and the way he looked at her like she was the best thing in his world. In April, Max's theater project finally got full approval, and he was almost giddy with excitement. They celebrated with champagne on his balcony, overlooking the city lights, and he told her about his plans for the restoration with so much passion that she just watched him talk, memorizing this moment. "You are not listening to me," he said, catching her staring. "I am. You were talking about the original ceiling moldings, and you have that look on your face." "What look?" "The one that makes me want to forget about moldings and focus on you instead." She laughed, setting down her glass. "I love you, you know." The words came out easy, simple, true. Max went very still, his eyes searching hers. "Say that again." "I love you, Maxwell Jennings." He pulled her close, kissing her hard enough to make her dizzy. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you too. Have for weeks. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. This seems like a pretty good moment." Yeah, it really does." That night felt like a turning point, like they were stepping into something bigger and more permanent. They talked about the future in concrete terms for the first time. Where they wanted to live, what their life could look like together. It was thrilling and terrifying and perfect. In May, Kira met Max's father properly at a company dinner that Max had been dreading for weeks. Richard Jennings was intimidating, all business and sharp edges, but he softened slightly when talking to Kira, asking about her work with genuine interest. "You are good for him," Richard said at one point when Max was across the room talking to investors. "He is different, happier." "He is good for me too," Kira said honestly. "Do not let him work too much. He gets tunnel vision on projects." "I have noticed." Richard smiled, small but real. "Good. He needs someone who will call him on his nonsense." The summer was a blur of stolen weekends and long evenings on Max's balcony, watching storms roll in off the lake. The theater project consumed most of Max's time, but he always made room for Kira, always prioritized their time together even when he was exhausted and stressed. In July, they took a long weekend and drove up to a small town in Wisconsin, staying in a bed and breakfast that had no cell service and terrible Wi-Fi. It was exactly what they both needed. They hiked and read books on the porch and had dinner at the only restaurant in town. They talked about everything and nothing, and on the last night, lying in bed with the windows open and the sound of crickets filling the air, Max said, "Move in with me." Kira propped herself up on one elbow. "What? Move in with me, officially. Not just a drawer and a toothbrush, all your stuff. All your plants, that weird ceramic cat, everything." "Max, I know it is fast. I know we have only been together 6 months, but I hate the nights you are not there. I hate sleeping without you. I want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every night." He cupped her face in his hand. "Move in with me." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, okay." His smile was brilliant. Yeah, let's do it." They drove back to Chicago already making plans, already mentally rearranging his apartment to fit her life into it. It took 2 weeks and help from her brothers and Rachel to move everything, and Max's pristine apartment suddenly looked lived in and warm with her touches everywhere. "It is perfect," Max said, standing in the middle of the living room surrounded by boxes. "You are perfect." "I am sweaty and covered in dust." "Still perfect." Fall arrived with its usual Chicago drama, temperatures swinging wildly and the leaves turning the city into a patchwork of gold and red. Max's Theater opened in October, a gala event that Kira attended in a dress Max insisted on buying for her. She watched him give a speech about preservation and community, looking confident and handsome in his tuxedo, and felt overwhelmed with pride. "You did it," she said later, when they had escaped the party for a moment alone in the empty theater balcony. "We did it. This whole project happened because you returned that briefcase. If I had lost those documents, if we had not met that day, none of this would exist. That is a bit dramatic. Maybe, but it feels true." He took her hands and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Kira, this year with you has been the best year of my life. You make everything better. Every day, every moment. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone." "Max, what are you doing?" He dropped to one knee, right there in the theater balcony, and pulled a small box from his pocket. "I am asking you to marry me. I know it has only been 10 months. I know this is probably too soon by all conventional standards. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and I do not want to wait anymore." Kira stared at the ring, a simple, beautiful diamond that caught the theater lights, then at Max's face, nervous and hopeful. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, of course, yes." He stood quickly, sliding the ring onto her finger before kissing her hard enough to make her forget they were in public. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, the theater erupted in applause. Kira looked down to see the gala guests gathered below, everyone cheering and clapping. "Did you plan that?" she asked. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "I wanted it to be special. It is perfect." They set a date for the following summer, wanting time to plan but not wanting to wait too long. Kira's mother flew in from Florida immediately to help plan, and Max's mother joined forces with her in a way that was both helpful and occasionally overwhelming. They chose the theater for their venue because it felt right, because it was where they had gotten engaged, because it was a symbol of Max's work and their future. The wedding was beautiful and chaotic, and everything they wanted. Kira's brothers walked her down the aisle together since her father had passed years before. Max cried when he saw her, not even trying to hide it, And she cried too, because how could she not when he looked at her like she was his whole world? They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of wine and pasta and getting deliciously lost in small villages. They talked about their future in concrete terms. Max wanted 3 kids. Kira wanted 2 but was willing to negotiate. They both wanted a house with a yard and room for all her plants and his growing art collection. Back in Chicago, they settled into married life with surprising ease. They bought a house in Lincoln Park with good schools nearby and a backyard big enough for the garden Kira had always wanted. Max's father officially retired, leaving Max in full control of the company. Kira got promoted to senior paralegal with a salary that made her feel like she was actually contributing to their expensive mortgage, even though Max always said it did not matter. A year after the wedding, Kira got pregnant. They told their families at Thanksgiving, and the reaction was exactly as loud and excited as expected. Max was nervous and thrilled in equal measure, reading every parenting book he could find and constantly asking Kira if she needed anything. Their daughter was born in June, tiny and perfect with Max's dark hair and Kira's nose. They named her Sarah after Kira's grandmother, and Max cried again when he held her for the first time. "I did not know I could love anything this much," he said, staring at his daughter in wonder. Welcome to parenthood. The first year was exhausting and beautiful and harder than either of them expected. They took turns with night feedings, learned to function on no sleep, and discovered that their love just expanded to fit this new person in their lives. Max was a devoted father, surprising everyone including himself with how naturally he took to it. Kira watched him read bedtime stories and make silly faces to get Sarah to laugh, and fell in love with him all over again. 3 years later, they had a son. Oliver was loud and energetic from day one, the complete opposite of his calm sister. Max joked that they now had a matched set, one of each, and their family felt complete. Life settled into a rhythm of school runs and birthday parties, client meetings and project deadlines, family dinners and stolen date nights. They fought sometimes, usually about stupid things like whose turn it was to do the dishes or whether they could afford to redo the kitchen. But they always worked through it, always came back to the fundamental truth that they were better together than apart. On their 5th anniversary, Kira was cleaning out Max's office at home while he was at work, trying to organize the chaos of papers and files he seemed to accumulate. She found the briefcase tucked in the back of his closet, the same one she had found on that bench years ago. On impulse, she opened it. Inside, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve, was a sticky note she had completely forgotten about. When she had called Max that first day, sitting on that plaza bench, she had stuck a post-it on the outside of a folder with her phone number, just in case he could not get her call or something went wrong. The note was in her handwriting. "Found your briefcase. Call me so I can return it." Kira, with her number and a smiley face she did not remember drawing, below her message in Max's handwriting, was a note she had never seen. "The day my life changed. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Kira stood there in his office holding that silly sticky note and felt tears prick her eyes. 5 years. 2 kids. A life neither of them could have imagined when she made that phone call. That night after the kids were asleep, she showed him the note. "I found your briefcase." He took it, reading both messages, and smiled. "I kept that because it made me laugh. Your handwriting is terrible, by the way. Hey. And because I knew even then that you were going to be important. I did not know how or why, but I knew." "That is very romantic for someone criticizing my handwriting." He pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made, forgetting that briefcase on that bench. You did not forget it on purpose." "Are you sure? Maybe it was fate." Kira laughed and kissed him, tasting wine and chocolate from dessert. Maybe it was. 10 years after that first meeting, they stood in the plaza outside the federal courthouse with their kids, showing them the bench where it all started. Sarah was 8 now, curious and thoughtful. Oliver was 5, bouncing with endless energy. "This is where you met?" Sarah asked, studying the bench skeptically. "This is where Mom found my briefcase and was nice enough to call me," Max explained. "And then you fell in love?" Oliver asked, making kissing noises that made Sarah groan. "Eventually, yeah," Kira said, glancing at Max with a smile. "What if Mom had not found the briefcase?" Sarah asked, always the one thinking through scenarios. "Then I would have been very sad and stressed, and I would not have met the most amazing person in the world," Max said, squeezing Kira's hand. "Gross," Oliver declared, running ahead toward the coffee cart. They chased after him, laughing, and Kira thought about how one small decision, one moment of kindness, had led to this entire life. It was not lost on her how easily it could have gone differently. She could have walked past that briefcase. She could have turned it in without looking for contact information. She could have said no to dinner, but she had not. She had stopped and called and said yes. And Max had been kind and genuine, and had loved her from almost the beginning with a steadiness that still took her breath away. That night, after the kids were asleep, and they were curled up on the couch with wine and the television playing something neither of them was really watching, Max said, "Do you ever think about how lucky we are? Every day. I am serious. What are the odds that I would leave my briefcase on that specific bench, that you would be the one to find it, that we would actually like each other? Astronomical, probably. And yet here we are." "Here we are," Kira agreed, setting down her wine and shifting to straddle his lap, running her fingers through his hair that was just starting to show gray at the temples. "Best briefcase I ever found. Best phone call I ever received." They kissed slow and deep, the kiss of two people who knew each other completely, who had built a life together from a chance meeting and chose each other every single day. Later, lying in bed with Max's arm around her and his breathing evening out into sleep, Kira thought about that sticky note, still preserved in his office. She thought about how a simple act of returning lost property had turned into love and marriage and children, and a whole life she could not have imagined. She thought about how the smallest moments could change everything, how kindness could lead to love, how sometimes fate worked in mysterious ways that looked like a forgotten briefcase, and a phone call, and a man who made her laugh. Max mumbled something in his sleep and pulled her closer, and Kira smiled in the darkness of their bedroom, in the house they had chosen together, in the life they had built. She never did find out what was so funny about that original sticky note to Max, but it did not matter. What mattered was that he had kept it, treasured it, added his own message about the day that changed his life. What mattered was this. Right here. Right now. The man she loved and the life they had created, and the knowledge that sometimes the best things came from the most unexpected places. In the morning, she would get up and make breakfast for their kids. Max would kiss her goodbye before heading to work. They would text throughout the day, checking in, staying connected. Tonight they would have dinner together, help with homework, read bedtime stories. It was ordinary and beautiful, and everything she had never known she wanted. All because one November day, she had stopped to help a stranger with a lost briefcase and found her whole future waiting on the other end of a phone call.